بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
Today, we are discussing selected verses of Para 10 of the Holy Quran, continuing our blessed series of explanations. We will not cover every single verse, but we will journey through key passages designed to ignite your curiosity and draw you deeper into the divine wisdom of Allah's eternal book. At the very beginning of this para, Allah establishes the divinely ordained system for distributing the spoils acquired in war against the disbelievers. When the believers emerge victorious in battle, the spoils are to be divided into 5 parts, out of which 4 parts of the war spoils are to be distributed among the mujahideen, the fighters who participated in the battle and carried its burden. The remaining 5th part belongs to Allah and His beloved Prophet Muhammad, and is to be further distributed among the Prophet's relatives, orphans, the needy and poor, and travelers who are stranded and without means. The beloved Prophet himself would decide how to allocate and distribute this 5th portion according to need and wisdom. It is deeply important to understand the noble character of our Prophet in relation to this provision. Prophet Muhammad never asked anything from anyone throughout his blessed life. We find a beautiful illustration of this in Surah Ash-Shura, where the companions of the Prophet once approached him saying, "Ya Rasulallah, we would very much like to present something as an offering to you." To this heartfelt request, the Prophet responded with characteristic selflessness, "I do not ask anything from you. But if you truly wish to do something for me, then love those who are near and dear to me." This is the depth of his generosity of spirit. His only request of his beloved companions was that they love his family. A further context is important here. Before Allah announced his prophethood, Prophet Muhammad would conduct business and trade to provide for himself and his household. But after the announcement of his prophethood, his entire life became dedicated to conveying the message of Islam, leaving him no time for commerce or trade. Therefore, the companions understood from this verse that the 5th portion of the spoils was a rightful provision tributed respectfully and lovingly to the court of their Prophet. In verse 42, Allah draws back the curtain to reveal the deeper wisdom behind the difficult circumstances the believers faced at the Battle of Badr. The terrain of the Muslims was far from ideal. There was a severe scarcity of water. The ground beneath their feet was soft and loose, making movement difficult and creating physical hardship. These adverse conditions began to sow seeds of doubt and misconception in the hearts of some believers. Why did Allah allow this to happen? Allah reveals the answer: because Allah's ordained decree, what He has destined and decided, will always come to pass. Many times Allah tests His believers through apparent hardship and misfortune, not because He desires to harm them, but because He wants to refine them, strengthen them, and demonstrate through their visible weakness the power of unseen divine support. In other words, Allah destined the Muslims to achieve victory despite every visible disadvantage. And what Allah decrees shall come to pass without fail. Continuing in verse 45, Allah reveals another profound dimension of divine wisdom at work during the Battle of Badr. During the night before the battle, Allah caused both the Muslim warriors and the disbelieving army to sleep. In the dreams of the Muslims, the disbelieving army was shown to them as small in number, fewer than they truly were. And similarly, in the dreams of the disbelievers, the Muslim forces were shown as small in number. This was entirely by Allah's will and had a clear divine purpose. To the Muslims, Allah showed the disbelievers in their dreams as few in number. Why? So that their hearts would remain firm and their courage unshaken. If they had seen the true strength of the enemy army, their resolve might have weakened. And to the disbelievers, Allah also showed the Muslims in their dreams as few in number. Why? Because if they had seen the believers in their true numbers, they would have fled the battlefield before the clash ever occurred. But Allah willed that truth and falsehood meet face to face on the day of the criterion, so that the victory of truth would be manifest and undeniable. Allah's will for the battle of Badr was precise and purposeful. He willed that truth and falsehood should meet and clash openly on the battlefield, so that through that clash, it would be demonstrated to all of creation that truth prevails. Both armies needed to walk into that confrontation with the resolve to fight, so that the victory of faith over disbelief could be witnessed and recorded for all generations. In the verses that follow, Allah addresses the believers with direct and vital instructions for battle. O believers! When you encounter an enemy in combat, be firm and steadfast. Do not waver or falter. And remember Allah frequently during the battle. His remembrance will keep your hearts strong and focused. Do not dispute and fight among yourselves. If you do, you will lose your courage and your strength will drain away. Do not be arrogant. Do not behave with the pride and show-off attitude of the disbelievers who marched out to be seen and admired by people. Here lies a profound truth. The Muslim Ummah becomes weak and cowardly not primarily through the strength of its enemies, but through its own internal conflicts and divisions. Allah then exposes the fate of the devil and his false promises. The devil had whispered confidence into the hearts of the disbelievers, assuring them of victory and pledging his support. He made them believe they would prevail. But when the moment of truth arrived, when truth and falsehood finally clashed in combat, the devil turned and fled. He abandoned those whose hearts he had filled with false promises, leaving them to face the consequences alone. In verse 49, the attitude of the hypocrites and those with malice in their hearts is exposed. Watching the small Muslim force march out to face a much larger army, these people sneered and said, "These Muslims, their faith has deluded and deceived them. They are walking into their own destruction." This reveals the timeless double standard of those who harbor ill will toward the believers. When a believer is patient and restrains himself from conflict, such people call him a coward. When that same believer stands up with courage and steps forward to fight, they call him arrogant and deluded. Such, unfortunately, is the characteristic conduct of those whose hearts are infected with envy and hypocrisy. In verse 53, Allah establishes one of the most fundamental laws governing of human existence. Allah will not change the circumstances of any people unless and until they themselves work toward that change. This is the divine law of natural consequence. First, make the effort yourself. Take the steps, work with dedication, apply your faculties and resources. Then, and only then, will Allah's assistance descend to help you accomplish what you seek. Divine help is not granted to those who sit idle and wait, it comes to those who strive. In verse 54 of this para, Allah reminds us of a sobering historical pattern. The people of Pharaoh and all the previous nations who came before them were utterly destroyed and annihilated, not for lack of wealth, not for weakness of armies, but specifically because they denied and rejected the verses and signs of Allah. In verses 56 to 58, Allah addresses the pattern of treaty breaking among certain Jewish groups of that era. These groups had made formal agreements and peace treaties with the Muslim community. Yet they would repeatedly violate these agreements, breaking their promises again and again, returning to hostility as soon as it served their interests. The pattern became undeniable. Their words could not be trusted. Their treaties were instruments of deception, not genuine commitments to peace. Finally, a point arrived when the Prophet was compelled to close all treaties and agreements with them completely. When trust is systematically destroyed, when promises are repeatedly broken, when peace is used as a cover for treachery, then the covenant must end. This is not a preference for war, it is an acknowledgement of reality. In verse 60, Allah gives a command that carries profound strategic and spiritual wisdom. Against your enemies, be prepared with all the military strength and cavalry that you can muster. Always be ready. Maintain a state of vigilance and high alert. Be a community that cannot be taken by surprise. The wisdom in this readiness is made explicit by Allah Himself. By doing this, you may strike terror into the hearts of the enemies of Allah and your own enemies. The mere fact of being visibly strong, well-equipped, and perpetually prepared is itself a form of deterrence. It prevents enemies from even contemplating aggression. But then, in the same breath, Allah reveals the beautiful balance of Islam. If the enemy signals readiness for peace, then you also must extend your hand for peace and be ready to agree. Subhanallah, what a complete and balanced system Islam is. If enemies come to fight, you fight. If they come for peace, you embrace peace. And throughout it all, place your complete trust in Allah. For if the enemy's intention is to deceive and backstab under the cover of a peace agreement, then know this, Allah is more than sufficient for you. His protection and knowledge surpass every scheme and conspiracy. In verse 63, Allah reveals one of the most magnificent signs of His power, a miracle that no amount of worldly resources could replicate. Allah says, "It was Allah who, with His grace and power, brought your hearts together in brotherhood." Even if you had spent all the wealth and fortune of the entire world, you could never have produced this bond and feeling of brotherhood in their hearts. This is something only Allah can do, to take hearts that were once strangers or even enemies, and weave between them a love and unity so strong that men would gladly sacrifice their lives for one another. After this Allah says to Prophet Muhammad, "And for you, O beloved Prophet, Allah is enough. And your loyal companions who believe are enough." This verse holds a special historical significance. It was revealed in connection with the blessed occasion when Hazrat Umar accepted Islam and recited the Tawheed. The arrival of someone of Umar's strength, resolve, and stature filled the hearts of the believers with new hope and courage. This verse also carries an important theological clarification for our time. Some people today, while living in homes with air conditioning, traveling in comfortable vehicles, surrounded by every modern convenience, casually say, "Allah is enough for us." And while this is true, this verse teaches us that when Allah declared He was sufficient, He immediately mentioned the believing companions alongside His declaration. He said He is enough and His believing servants are enough. This means that we cannot, on one hand, claim Allah's sufficiency while dismissing or denying the people whom Allah Himself has loved, chosen, and elevated, particularly the awliya, the friends and beloved servants of Allah. One cannot disregard those whom Allah Himself has honored and simultaneously claim to be honoring Allah. In verse 65, Allah addresses His Prophet directly with a command that carries within it a promise. "O Prophet, motivate the believers to fight. If there are 20 steadfast among you, they will overcome 200. And if there are 100 of you, they will overcome 1,000 of the disbelievers." This is not arithmetic, it is divine mathematics. The equation of this world is calculated based on numbers, weapons, and resources. The equation of Allah is calculated based on steadfastness, faith, and reliance upon Him. When these qualities are present, the ratio shifts. 20 can overcome 200. 100 can overcome 1,000. The condition is clear: steadfastness. Not mere belief, but belief that remains firm when tested. Not faith that flourishes in ease and evaporates in hardship, but faith that stands rooted even in the adversity. In verse 72, Allah describes the profound bonds and distinctions among the community of believers. Those believers who fought with their lives and their wealth in the path of Allah, the emigrants who left their homes for the sake of their faith, the refugees who sacrificed comfort and security, the loyal companions who stood by the Prophet and allied themselves with the truth, all of these are friends and allies of one another. These are the true believers, and for them is the forgiveness of Allah and wealth that is halal and honorable. Similarly, The disbelievers are allies and friends with one another. They too form a united bloc against the believers. Allah acknowledges that among the Muslims, there exist different levels and standards. Those who accepted Islam and made the migration before the conquest of Makkah occupy a higher station of honor than those who accepted Islam afterward. These are differences in rank and reward, earned through sacrifice and timing. Yet despite these distinctions in rank, Allah has promised to do goodness with everyone. Every Muslim who brings sincere faith and acts righteously will receive Allah's mercy and care, at whatever level their circumstances and choices have placed them. We now enter Surah Tawbah, the only chapter in the entire Quran that does not begin with Bismillah. This is a Madani surah, revealed in Medina. Its central themes revolve around the final dissolution of treaties with the polytheists of Arabia, the rules and conduct of war, the exposure and critique of hypocrites, also known as munafiqun, the lessons of the Battle of Tabuk, a difficult expedition undertaken in intense heat. The absence of Bismillah at the beginning of this surah is itself a message. Bismillah is a declaration of mercy, peace, and compassion. Surah At-Tawbah opens with a declaration of disassociation from the treaty breakers, a stern warning, a final ultimatum. The tone is one of gravity, not gentleness, of warning, not invitation. Hence, the Bismillah is withheld. In the very first verse of Surah Tawbah, Allah declares a formal proclamation to the disbelievers of the Arabian Peninsula. The Arab polytheists were given 4 months of time, a formal period of grace, within which they could choose, either prepare for war against the Muslims, or accept Islam and enter the fold of faith. This declaration of ultimatum was also accompanied by a nuanced and just clarification that the disbelievers who had entered into business dealings or formal agreements with the Muslims from the very beginning, and who had honored their treaties faithfully without ever assisting any enemy against the Muslims must, for their part, fulfill their agreements with these people completely and without unilateral breach, until the agreed timeline expired. Only after the conclusion of the sacred months, and only against those polytheists who had violated their treaties and proven themselves treacherous, was the command given, pursue them, capture them, besiege them, and wherever you find them, make them face the consequences of their deeds. This command must be understood in its proper context. It came after a long period of patience, forgiveness, and repeated attempts at peaceful coexistence. Islam, as always, commands forgiveness first. This final declaration of war came only after every avenue of peace had been exhausted and every treaty had been violated. Then, in verse 6 of this surah, Allah reveals one of the most beautiful and compassionate commands in the entire Quran. And if any of the polytheists seeks your protection, O Prophet, grant it to him so that he may hear the word of Allah, then escort him to his place of safety. This is because they are a people who do not know. Even after the ultimatum, even after the declaration of disassociation, even while the command to confront the aggressors stands, the door of guidance remains open. If a disbeliever comes to the Prophet seeking to understand the message, seeking to hear the word of Allah, what is the command? Grant them protection, provide them safe passage, allow them to listen to the Quran without fear, let them reflect upon its verses in peace, and then, escort them to their place of safety. Do not harm them, do not pressure them, do not coerce them. Once they have heard the message, return them safely to their own people. Why? Because they are people who do not know. This is the character of Islam, and this is the conduct of the Prophet. While the sword of justice hangs over the heads of the treacherous, the door of mercy remains wide open for the seeker of truth. From verses 8 to 10, Allah exposes the true character of those disbelievers who behave hypocritically toward the Muslims. Their intelligence and moral compass are so corrupted that if they were ever to gain the upper hand over the Muslims, they would not honor even the closest bonds of kinship or the most solemn of treaties. Every promise would be broken, every agreement would be cast aside the moment it became inconvenient. However, Allah provides a path of transformation. If any of these disbelievers repent sincerely, bring true faith, and follow the ways of Islam, then they are your brothers. The enmity of the past is erased, and the hatred is removed from the heart. They enter the fold of brotherhood in faith, equal in standing to every other believer. In verses 12 and the verses that follow, Allah addresses those among the disbelievers who make oaths and promises only to break them immediately after. Such people are no longer eligible for forgiveness. They have forfeited their right to mercy through the pattern of their deception. This was not the first time they had broken faith. They had done the very same, violating their oaths with Prophet Muhammad too repeatedly. In verse 16, Allah declares, "Do you think you will be left untested without Allah identifying those among you who strive in His cause and take no trusted allies besides Allah, His Messenger, and the believers?" This verse shows us. Trials are not punishments, they are revelations. They do not create what is hidden, they expose what is already there. The ordeal comes, and suddenly the sincere believer stands firm while the hypocrite retreats. The truthful one remains steadfast while the pretender reveals his true colors. Allah does not need trials to know who is sincere, He knows all things before they occur. We need trials to know ourselves. In verses 17 and 18, Allah establishes a profound criterion. It is not for the polytheists to maintain the mosques of Allah while they bear witness to their own disbelief. Their deeds have become worthless, and they will abide eternally in the fire. A structure of worship, when maintained by those who reject the one being worshipped, becomes a contradiction. The Kaaba itself had been surrounded by idols. The polytheists circled it naked, whistled and clapped instead of praying, and turned the house of Allah into a theater of polytheism. Who then has the right to maintain the mosques of Allah? The mosques of Allah are only to be maintained by those who believe in Allah and the Last Day, establish prayer, give zakat, and fear none but Allah. The proof of faith is not architecture, it is obedience. A mosque built by a disbeliever is stone and mortar. And a mosque maintained by a believer, even a humble structure, is a sanctuary of divine presence. In verse 19, Allah addresses a misconception that persists in every generation. Do you consider providing water to pilgrims and maintaining the sacred mosque as equal to believing in Allah and the Last Day and striving in the cause of Allah? The polytheists of Makkah took great pride in their role as custodians of the Kaaba and providers of water to the pilgrims. These were, objectively, good deeds. They involved service, generosity, and community honor. But Allah declares, these deeds, however noble, are not equal to faith and jihad. Because good deeds performed without faith are like a body without a soul. They may appear alive, but they lack the animating principle that gives them eternal value. Those who have believed, migrated, and strived in Allah's cause, they are the ones who hope for His mercy. Not those who inherited custodianship from their ancestors, not those who performed rituals without conviction, not those who served the house while rejecting the Lord of the house. In verse 23, Allah delivers a command that cuts to the very heart of what it means to be a believer. O believers, do not take your fathers and your brothers as your closest allies if they prefer kufr, disbelief, over iman, faith. If a person's closest family, their own father, their own brother, chooses disbelief over faith and is actively working against Islam and the Muslims, then the bond of faith must take priority. You must sever and distance yourself from that relationship to the extent it conflicts with your loyalty to Allah. Allah says, and the one who befriends and allies himself with the disbelievers against the believers is a wrongdoer and a transgressor. Then, in verse 24, Allah expands this command into a comprehensive criterion. Say, if your fathers, your sons, your brothers, your spouses, your clan, the wealth you have acquired, a business you fear may decline, and homes you cherish, are dearer to you than Allah, His Messenger, and striving in His cause, then wait until Allah brings about His decree. Allah does not guide the rebellious people. This verse is an X-ray of the heart. It lists everything that competes with divine love: family, wealth, business, property, status. And then it poses the ultimate question: what do you love more? Not theoretically, not rhetorically, actually. When love for Allah and love for this world conflict, which one prevails? If the things of this world are dearer to you than Allah, His Messenger, and the struggle in His path, then wait for the decree of Allah, wait for the day when every hidden attachment will be exposed and every secret loyalty will be revealed. This verse is not a condemnation, it is a call to reorder our hearts, to examine our priorities, to recognize that faith is not complete until love for Allah and His Messenger surpasses every other love. In verse 25, Allah draws upon the powerful lesson of the Battle of Hunain as a timeless warning against the dangerous sin of pride in one's own strength and numbers. At the Battle of Hunain, the Muslim army was extraordinarily strong in number, 12,000 warriors. The opposing disbelieving force numbered only 4,000. Looking at these numbers, some Muslims felt a surge of confidence, perhaps even pride, thinking that with such overwhelming numerical superiority, victory was assured. But that pride led to a momentary defeat. The initial engagement did not go in the Muslims' favor, and panic began to spread through some ranks. Then Allah intervened. He bestowed tranquility and peace upon the heart of His beloved Prophet and upon the hearts of the steadfast believers. He sent down His unseen army of angels and divine help, and through that divine assistance, the Muslims achieved ultimate victory. The lesson is eternal: never place your trust in numbers or resources, trust only in Allah. Pride in human strength will always find its humbling moment. In 9 Hijri, a momentous and historic announcement was made at the gathering of Hajj, during the day of Arafah. From that year onward, polytheists and disbelievers would no longer be permitted to enter or be present in Masjid al-Haram, the sacred mosque in Makkah. Before this proclamation, they had been allowed entry. This divine command formally and permanently sealed the sacred mosque as a sanctuary exclusively for believers. To this, some Muslims expressed concern that this prohibition would harm the economy of Makkah, as the income from pilgrims had included the polytheists. But Allah immediately reassured them, "Do not let fear of worldly loss prevent you from establishing divine command. Provision comes from Allah, not from patrons. He is the provider, He will provide, and He'll soon enrich you." In verse 29, Allah commands the believers regarding the people of the book, Jews and Christians. Fight against those who do not believe in Allah nor the last day, nor forbid what Allah and His Messenger have forbidden, nor adopt the religion of truth, from among those who were given the scripture, until they pay the jizya with willing submission and feel themselves subdued. Jizya is a tax levied upon able-bodied, adult non-Muslim males under the protection of the Islamic State in exchange for exemption from military service, protection of life, property, and religious practice. The right to live under the justice and security of the Islamic governance. It was not a punishment for disbelief, it was a contract of protection. The state had the duty to defend its citizens. Those who did not serve in the military contributed financially to the defense infrastructure. Throughout Islamic history, there were periods when Christians and Jews preferred to live under Muslim governance, where their churches and synagogues were protected, their clergy exempt from taxation, and their communities granted autonomy over the rule of their co-religionists. This verse is not a command of persecution, it is a command of structured coexistence in a context where war was the default state of international relations. In verse 30 and the verses that follow, Allah addresses the theological deviations of the people of the book directly and firmly. The Jews say, Uzair, Ejra, is the son of Allah. The Christians say, Prophet Isa, Christ, is the son of Allah. These are statements they utter with their mouths, claims entirely devoid of truth, merely imitating the false sayings of unbelievers from earlier ages. Allah declares Himself absolutely transcendent above such attributes. He does not beget, nor was He begotten. He has no partner, no equal, no son, no father. The Quran then continues, exposing a deeper corruption. These communities had taken their rabbis, their priests, and their religious scholars as lords beside Allah. They had given these men the authority to declare what is halal and what is haram, an authority that belongs to Allah alone. And they had elevated Prophet Isa, Jesus, peace be upon him, to divine status, despite the fact that both the Torah and the Gospel clearly commanded them to worship none but Allah, the one God, beside whom there is none worthy of worship. Allah is infinitely exalted above every false association they attach to Him. In the same passage, Allah delivers a declaration of absolute certainty. They seek to extinguish the light of Allah with their mouths, but Allah refuses except to perfect His light, even though the disbelievers may detest it. The light of Allah is not a physical flame that can be blown out by human breath. It is the truth of revelation, the guidance of the Quran, the message of Islam. The disbelievers can mock it, distort it, fight against it, legislate against it, and try to erase it from public life. They will fail. Allah will complete His light and His religion will prevail, and His truth will be established. Not because Muslims are superior strategists or more powerful militarily, but because Allah has decreed it and His decree cannot be reversed. This is not triumphalism, it is certainty in divine promise. In verses 34 and 35, Allah speaks about a grave transgression committed by the rabbis and priests among the Jews and Christians. They were misappropriating and unlawfully consuming the wealth of ordinary people, those who trusted them as religious authorities. Through religious pretexts and spiritual manipulation, they accumulated wealth that was not rightfully theirs, all while blocking and hindering people from the true path of Allah. And among the general people, Allah warns all those who hoard gold, silver, and wealth, accumulating it greedily without spending in the path of Allah, without fulfilling the rights of the poor, without contributing to the welfare of the community, proclaiming to them a most painful punishment. Then Allah paints a vivid and terrifying picture of what awaits them on the Day of Judgment, that day of promises which shall surely come without fail. Their very treasures, the gold and silver they hoarded and refused to spend, will be heated in the blazing fire of hell until they glow with intense heat. Then this burning metal will be branded upon their foreheads, upon their sides, and upon their backs. And as they writhe in agony, they will be told, "This is the very treasure which you hoarded and refused to spend in the path of Allah. Now taste what you spent your life accumulating." In verse 36, Allah declares, "Indeed, the number of months with Allah is 12 months in the register of Allah from the day He created the heavens and the earth. Of these, 4 are sacred. Time itself is a creation of Allah, and He has imbued certain periods with sacredness. The 4 sacred months are Dhul Qaeda, the 11th month; Dhul Hijjah, the 12th month; Muharram, the 1st month; Rajab, the 7th month. During these months, warfare is disliked, not absolutely prohibited, but discouraged. These are months for pilgrimage, for reflection, for intensifying worship, for making peace. This divine ordering of time predates Islam. It was known to Abraham and Ishmael, preserved through the ages, and sometimes manipulated by the pre-Islamic Arabs who would shift months to suit their military ambitions. Islam restored the original, uncorrupted calendar. In verses 38 and 39, Allah addresses the believers with a firm and urgent tone regarding the call to jihad. When the call of jihad is made, do not display laziness, hesitation, or reluctance. The warning is severe. Those who show laziness when called to fight in the path of Allah face a great and painful punishment. Allah then intensifies the warning further. And do not even think for a moment that this ruling of jihad is exclusively upon you or that you are indispensable. If you do not march forth and respond to the call, Allah will afflict you with a painful torment and replace you with other people in your stead. You are not causing any harm to Allah by staying behind, you are only harming yourselves. And Allah is most capable of everything. This is not a threat of individual punishment, it is a historical law. When a community that has been entrusted with divine mission refuses to fulfill it, that mission is withdrawn and given to another community. History bears witness to this law. Nations rise to carry the banner of truth, and when they abandon it, they fall and are replaced. In verse 40, one of the most honored and celebrated verses of the Quran is found, the verse that directly addresses the blessed event of the Prophet's migration and the extraordinary station of Hazrat Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. During the migration, the Prophet and Abu Bakr took refuge in the cave of Thor, or known as Cave of Sor, to hide from the pursuing Quraysh. This verse commemorates that sacred and solitude moment with the highest honor. In this single verse, Hazrat Abu Bakr as-Siddiq is honored and addressed in 6 distinct ways. He is called the companion of the Prophet, directly by Allah Himself, in the words of the Quran. He was chosen to accompany the Prophet in his migration. He was present with the Prophet in the cave. The Prophet consoled him by saying, "Do not grieve." The Prophet assured him, "Allah is with us." Allah sent His tranquility down upon the Prophet and his companion. This is a point of profound theological significance, when the Quran itself, the eternal, unchanged word of Allah, refers to Hazrat Abu Bakr as the companion of the Prophet. It establishes his companionship as a divinely affirmed reality. Anyone who denies the companionship of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq with the Prophet is directly contradicting and going against the Quran itself. The Quran has spoken. There can be no higher testimony. Those who deny the status, the Khalifa, or the companionship of Abu Bakr are not merely disputing historical interpretations, they are contradicting the explicit words of Allah in His Quran. In the following upcoming verses, the call to jihad is renewed. March forth, whether lightly equipped or heavily equipped, and strive with your wealth and your lives in the cause of Allah. That is best for you, if only you knew. Lightly or heavily, this is an inclusive command that leaves no room for excuses. Whether you are strong or weak, wealthy or poor, free or occupied, single or with family responsibilities, there is a form of jihad appropriate to your condition. Jihad is not only on the battlefield. There is jihad with wealth, spending, supporting, funding. Jihad with the tongue, speaking truth, conveying the message, defending the faith. Jihad with the heart, struggling against one's own desires, purifying intentions. Jihad with knowledge, learning, teaching, combating ignorance. Jihad with patience, enduring hardship with steadfastness. No one is exempt from all forms of jihad. From verse 42 onward, Allah conducts a masterclass in the psychology and behavior of hypocrites, those who outwardly profess faith while inwardly harboring disbelief. In these same verses, a stark contrast is drawn between the sincere believers and the hypocrites regarding jihad. The hypocrites manufacture excuses and pretexts to avoid participating in jihad. They invent reasons, claim illness, cite personal obligations, anything to justify staying behind. Meanwhile, the true believers are always ready, always present, always willing to sacrifice. Then Allah reveals an even more concerning reality about those hypocrites who might somehow join the Muslim ranks. Even if they were to march with the Muslim army, their presence would be more harmful than their absence. They would have worked to create disorder and spread confusion among the Muslim ranks. And there would have been some among the sincere believers who would have listened to their whisperings and been influenced. It is actually a mercy of Allah that such hypocrites stayed behind. The following upcoming verses continue to expose the true nature of the hypocrites in extraordinary detail. When good news and victory come to the Muslims, these hypocrites do not rejoice. Instead, jealousy and resentment eat away at them from within. They cannot bear to see the believers succeed. When something bad or difficult happens to the Muslims, these hypocrites are delighted. They gloat and say smugly, "We knew this would happen from the very beginning. We told you so." Both victory and martyrdom are good for Muslims, victory in this world, and martyrdom bringing eternal paradise. Yet the hypocrites cannot find any response to this except bitterness either way. Among the additional traits of the hypocrites that Allah exposes, they do not offer their prayers with a full heart or with joy and willingness. When they pray, if they pray at all, they do so reluctantly, as a burden, without the sweetness of devotion or the sincerity of worship. When they spend in the path of Allah, they do so as if compelled by force, grudgingly, as if the money were being extracted from them unwillingly, rather than out of love for Allah or genuine desire to contribute. They swear oaths by Allah, making solemn declarations that they are with the Muslims and that they stand alongside the believers. But in reality, they are not truly of the believers. Their presence with the Muslim community is motivated entirely by fear, fear for their physical safety and fear of losing their material wealth. They cling to the Muslim community for protection and worldly advantage, not out of faith. In verse 61, another dimension of hypocritical behavior is revealed. Certain hypocrites, finding fault with everything, took to criticizing and mocking the Prophet, saying, "He is a man who believes everything he hears. He accepts whatever anyone tells him, he has no discernment." Allah responds to this slander directly and beautifully. Say, his listening and accepting is actually good for you. He listens to what is best for you. He believes in Allah with complete sincerity. He places his faith in the believers and their testimony. And he is a mercy and a blessing for all of you who are true believers. The Prophet's openness to hearing people, his accessibility, his willingness to listen, these are not weaknesses. They are qualities of mercy and compassion that made him a blessing to everyone around him. As for those who hurt and cause pain to Allah's Messenger, they will suffer a most painful punishment. These same hypocrites, whenever caught in their mockery and scheming, would quickly swear by Allah to the believers, insisting they meant no harm, that they were only joking and having fun. Allah exposes their hypocrisy. Were you mocking Allah? Were you making sport of His revelations? Were you ridiculing His Messenger? There is no excuse for this. In verses 67 and the verses that follow, Allah draws a definitive and comprehensive contrast between the two groups. The hypocrite men and hypocrite women are all alike. They share the same corrupt character, they enjoin what is evil, they forbid what is good and just, and they withhold their hands and resources from doing good. They have forgotten Allah, turned away from Him, and so Allah has forgotten them also too. His mercy and guidance have turned away from them in return. In direct contrast, the believing men and believing women are also alike in their righteousness. They command and encourage good deeds. They forbid and prevent evil. They establish their prayers, salah, with devotion. They give their zakat generously. And they follow and walk in the blessed footsteps of Prophet Muhammad, taking him as their model in every aspect of life. For these believing men and women, Allah has promised an incomparable reward, gardens of paradise beneath which rivers flow, to dwell therein forever, beautiful, magnificent mansions in these gardens of everlasting bliss, and most gloriously of all, the pleasure and good pleasure of Allah Himself. That is the supreme achievement, the highest success that any soul could ever attain. In verse 73, Allah issues a direct command to His beloved Prophet. O Prophet, struggle against the disbelievers and the hypocrites, and be firm and resolute with both of them. Hell will be their final home and their permanent abode. The struggle against hypocrisy is as real and as important as the struggle against open disbelief. Both represent rejections of truth, one overt, one concealed. Allah then exposes another dimension of hypocrisy. They swear by Allah that they never said any blasphemy, yet they did in fact utter words of blasphemy, and in doing so, they lost their faith after having ostensibly accepted Islam. In verse 75, Allah reveals yet another specific category of hypocrisy, the broken promise of the stingy. Among the hypocrites were those who had made a solemn covenant with Allah, declaring, "If Allah bestows His bounty upon us and enriches us, we will most certainly spend generously in charity and become truly among the righteous." But when Allah did indeed bestow His bounty upon them, when wealth did flow to them, they immediately became miserly and tight-fisted. They turned their backs on their covenant with Allah, became evasive and avoidant, and found every excuse not to give what they had promised. This is the hypocrisy of conditional generosity, generosity promised in poverty but abandoned in wealth. In verse 78, Allah reminds us of a reality that every hypocrite and every human being must never forget. Allah fully knows your evil thoughts and your secret conversations. He is the all-knowing, the knower of every unseen thing. In verse 79, Allah exposes another despicable characteristic of the hypocrites. When true believers gave generously in charity, donating substantial amounts in the path of Allah, the hypocrites would slander and mock them, accusing them of showing off and seeking reputation. And when other believers gave what little they could afford, perhaps only a small amount from their meager earnings, the hypocrites would mock them too, sneering at the smallness of their contribution. They found something to criticize regardless. Too much was ostentation, too little was worthlessness. Allah will throw their mockery back at them, and they will face a severe and painful punishment for this cruelty towards sincere believers. Then comes the heavy verse, O Prophet, whether you seek forgiveness for them or do not seek forgiveness for them, even if you were to ask forgiveness for them 70 times, Allah will not forgive them. Why? Because they have denied Allah and His Messenger. Allah does not guide those who are transgressors. This verse is a severe limit on intercession. The Prophet, whose heart overflowed with mercy, naturally desired to seek forgiveness for those who professed faith, even if their faith was imperfect. But when disbelief is established and rebellion is confirmed, even the Prophet's supplication cannot reverse divine decree. This verse also carries a particularly weighty lesson about those who disrespect and demean the beloved Prophet. There is no salvation, no intercession, and no hope for those whose hearts harbor contempt for Allah's most beloved servant. Those who disrespect, mock, or harm Allah's beloved Prophet has placed themselves beyond the reach of Allah's intercession. In verses 81 and beyond, Allah describes those who remained behind during the Tabuk expedition. Those who remained behind rejoiced in their staying behind the Messenger of Allah. They hated to strive with their wealth and their lives in the cause of Allah, and they said, "Do not go forth in this heat." They rejoiced. Their hearts were not heavy with guilt, they were light with satisfaction. They had avoided hardship, preserved their comfort, stayed in the shade while others marched in the scorching sun. They considered themselves the victors. Allah's response cuts through their self-congratulation. Say, the fire of hell is far more intense in heat. If only they could understand. They escaped the heat of the desert, only to earn the heat of eternal fire. They preserved their lives, only to lose their souls. They thought they were clever. They were merely short-sighted. In verse 84, Allah issues a definitive command on the account of hypocrites. And never pray over any of them who dies, nor stand at his grave. They have indeed disbelieved in Allah and His Messenger and died while they were rebellious. The hypocrites who had concealed their disbelief, prayed in the rows of Muslims, married into Muslim families, and participated in the external life of the community, when they died, their true state was finally and fully exposed. The Prophet was forbidden from praying over their bodies or visiting their graves. This was not out of personal animosity. It was a divine instruction to establish an unmistakable distinction between believers and hypocrites. The funeral prayer is an intercession. For those who spent their lives mocking faith, betraying trust, and opposing the Prophet's mission, there would be no intercession from the one they had wronged. After the extensive and detailed exposé of the hypocrites and their excuses, Allah shifts with great compassion to address those who genuinely could not participate in jihad. Allah exempts and excuses the following from the obligation of jihad: the elderly and those too ill to fight, the sick and infirm, the truly destitute who have no means to equip themselves. And then one of the most touching descriptions in the Quran follows. There were companions who came to the Prophet with tears in their eyes, heartbroken and filled with grief. They pleaded to be taken along to the battlefront at Tabuk. They desperately wanted to go and fight in the path of Allah. But the Prophet had to tell them sorrowfully, "I am unable to provide you with the conveyance and provisions needed." These men turned away from the Prophet with tears streaming from their eyes, filled with the deepest sorrow that they lacked the resources to join the jihad at their own expense. Their willing spirits were ready, only their material means were insufficient. For these men, there is no blame, no reproach, no shame whatsoever. Their intention was pure, their love for Allah's path was genuine, their tears were testimony enough. But the blame, and the strict accountability, falls upon those who sought exemption from the Prophet despite having full means. Those who had wealth, health, and resources yet fabricated excuses to stay behind, preferring comfortable inaction to sacrifice. They preferred to stay behind with the helpless. And Allah has sealed their hearts. This is a reminder for all times: when you have strength, whether physical, financial, intellectual, or through any other capacity, you must use that strength in the way of Allah. This encompasses all forms of jihad: jihad with the tongue, which is speaking truth and defending the faith; jihad through deeds, which is acting righteously and serving the community; jihad through wealth, which is spending generously in Allah's path; and every other form of striving. May Allah bless us all with the understanding to recognize our capacity and the sincerity to use it in His path. As we draw our journey through Para 10 to a close, the teachings of this para speak across centuries with the same clarity and power as the day they were first revealed. Para 10 stitches together law and mercy, courage and caution, testing and tenderness. Its verses are not dusty history, they are a moral engine for a living community. Taken together, they demand that we organize our homes and our polity around justice, that we read every trial as a test and every blessing as a trust, and that we measure success by the firmness of our faith, not the size of our armies or our bank balances. This portion of the Quran teaches a clear social ethic: communal wealth must be distributed fairly so those who sacrifice and those who suffer are both protected. At Badr we learn that apparent weakness can be the stage for divine strength. When Allah wills, victory is not calculated by numbers but by the quality of the hearts that stand firm. That is why verse 65's 20 against 200 is a spiritual equation. Devotion multiplies strength in ways material arithmetic cannot. Unity is a strategic and spiritual imperative. Internal discord hands advantage to the enemies of truth. Likewise, the Quran balances firmness and mercy in foreign relations. Readiness for defense and readiness for peace are two sides of the same prophetic policy. Related to this is the fundamental principle that effort precedes assistance. Allah does not overturn human passivity with miracles for those who refuse to act. Change begins from within, and divine help crowns sincere striving. Para 10 is stern about hypocrisy. The Quran paints hypocrisy in detail not to shame others only, but to hold a mirror before every heart. If we find ourselves mocking charity, making excuses to avoid sacrifice, or rejoicing at the misfortune of the community, we must fear that creeping hypocrisy and return to sincerity. Conversely, the text honors tender realities. Those who truly intend to serve but lack means are not condemned. Intention and incapacity are seen and weighed by Allah. And the obligation to strive, jihad, is distributed according to capacity, physical strength, financial resources, knowledge, or voice. Every gift is a responsibility. The passage sets a final, non-negotiable horizon. Love for Allah and His Messenger must outscore all worldly attachments. Family, wealth, comfort, all are gifts, but none must usurp the divine. The Quran's praise of Abu Bakr's companionship, the sanctity of the mosques, and the absolute warning against dishonoring the Prophet make plain that certain loyalties are foundational for the believer's identity. So what is the practical takeaway? Let this para reorder your priorities. Guard unity and avoid petty divisions. Spend from what you love for the sake of Allah. Prepare with wisdom while always choosing peace when it is sincere. Examine your heart daily for hypocrisy, and love Allah and His Messenger more than anything this world offers. May Allah fill our hearts with the love of Allah and His beloved Prophet above all worldly attachments. May He protect us from the diseases of hypocrisy, pride, and stinginess. May He make us among those who respond to His call quickly and willingly, who maintain His houses with sincere hearts, and who carry the torch of truth in whatever capacity He has blessed us with. Ameen.